Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 2 preview out there for the Zurich Classic. Gonna break down quickly what you need to know for tomorrow. Then go out there, enter some DFS lineups, enter prop slips, whatever the exposure might be. Here to go over all of those questions and some of that pertinent info. So we'll start with the weather, how that is going to impact play. Afterwards, we'll talk through some DFS stuff, some showdown strategy, some game theory lineup construction you might want to consider out there for Friday. And then towards the end, we'll go over a few props that I like. Hopefully, we have a PGA board by then. If not, a lot of LIV props I want to talk about for tonight, which lock is actually going to be at 9:45 Eastern time, so just over an hour from now. So if you have any last-second concerns when it comes to that slate, DFS, props, whatever the case may be, you can also go ahead and throw those down in the live chat. But I know this is one for the sweaties. This is probably going to be a quicker live stream than normal, as we're not going to have as much to talk about here. But I know a lot of people are still looking to get exposure for showdown rounds 2 through 4. And just like the main slate, I still think there's an edge to be had, right? I think people forget their DFS fundamentals when it comes to some of these formats. And you can take advantage of that out there for showdown, or of course out there for the main slate. So hopefully you're having a good week so far. We're able to enjoy the golf. We've got the NFL draft going on right now. It looks like the Patriots have their pick in. I've got it over here on the side tablet, so I'll be tracking that like a lot of you out there are as well. And if you're tuning into the live stream right now during the live draft, you're even more of a sweaty tryhard. So I love that. We got Bart down there. Let's have a great show. Appreciate that, man. Welcome to the chat. What's going on? Mark down there, Mark Zarati. Hopefully you're having a great day too. Kep, I have a player in mind for you, so we'll get back to that. I actually put somebody in the highlighted plays anticipating your question. So definitely have a bounce back guy for you. What's going on, Anthony? Hopefully you're having a solid Thursday night. So let's bring up the weather. We're just going to hop right on in. We're not really going to skip any time at all here. Not waste any time, I should say. So the weather forecast for Friday does present a little bit of a weather edge, right? This afternoon, conditions undoubtedly got harder. It was a best ball format, so teams are still going to get after it, right? That didn't hold back a Rory or a Shane Lowry from going out there and nuking the golf course in the afternoon. But you got a lot more ceiling performances. A lot of the players that were shooting -8, 9, or even better out there in the morning wave came during some of the earlier tee times. And part of that was weather related, but part of it was because of the wind kicking up as the day went on, but also the imperfections in the putting surfaces, and of course, how firm they get as the day goes on. And that is going to be a huge part of any southern golf course, right? Especially a southeastern golf course. It's pretty similar to what we get down here in Florida. And if you take a look at the Florida swing, there was normally half a stroke to an entire stroke difference between almost all of the waves out there. So I would expect to see that kind of split once again. I don't think that's going to go away magically from rounds 1 to 2. And when we take a look at the weather forecast here, it does look like the PM wave is going to get spicy, right? When you have 14 to 15 miles an hour of sustained winds, you have like 20 miles an hour of the wind gusts out there, that's going to impact play. So I'm not sure who New England took. I wasn't able to catch that on there. If they took Drake May, I guess that's pretty sweet. I think he's a good fit for him. But yeah, this weather forecast, right, with it getting spicier in the afternoon, does look like we could take the earlier starters, right, those AM wave players, and maybe get that half a stroke to a stroke advantage. So, you know, going back to our slate plan, right, trying to figure out how to approach this for Friday, just go to your DFS fundamentals, right? If it's going to be softer earlier, if it's still going to be relatively warm, right, with those lower winds, then take the morning guys, right? They have a better chance of going out there and having a ceiling round. And in alternate shot, which is already a difficult enough format to begin with, you need to take any edge that you can get. So what I'm doing with my showdown exposure is only taking AM guys, right? When it's a wacky format like this, we have to try and squeeze any sort of juice that we can out of this slate. And really, I think the weather, the half a stroke, maybe a stroke advantage, could be exactly that. So that's what I'll be doing. I'll be exclusively taking guys that are teeing off in that first set of tee times and going on from that. So we'll circle back to this when we talk about props later, but the scoring average for this format is normally like even par, maybe close to like an entire stroke under par if you get calm conditions. But with the winds expected to kick up a little bit right out there for Friday, it's probably going to be closer to that even par scoring average. So we'll have to see if Prize Picks ends up giving us stuff. It looks like they actually have already. So they've got some birdie stuff and some stroke stuff already posted over there. So we'll have plenty of stuff to talk about that later on. So in terms of DFS, I'm going to bring up our projections. Again, this is going to be an expedited version of this live stream just because I do want to keep somewhat of tabs over there on the draft. And I know there's not going to be as many people here, right? It's obviously Showdown for one of these wonky events, but want to go ahead and give it its due diligence. I'm going to go ahead and stop now and go over our sponsor for this live stream. So before we hop into the projections, player pool strategy out there for tomorrow, I want to remind you guys to check out Ship It Nation. They are sponsoring this live stream just like they have for the last few weeks for our rounds 2 through 4 live streams. And you can check them out for all your DFS needs outside of what we have here with golf, right? So obviously I cover a lot of golf stuff this time of year, NFL, when it swings back around. So that's why I keep an eye on the draft over there. But in terms of PGA DFS, they have a great product over there, right? Obviously DGen75 and his crew are doing a lot out there with their stone. They've got Lee with the course rankings, Hoop and Tambo doing their thing like they've done for quite some time over there. And it's not just golf, right? So that's why I bring this up. That's why they're a great partner for my channel. They cover a variety of different sports. So we're going to talk about it for rounds 3 and 4 as well. They're also going to be sponsoring us for the last 2 days. So we'll have a lot more to talk about with Ship It Nation. But, have to mention them, right? They're the sponsor of the show. They make it possible. They bring a lot of people down to live chat down there from the Ship It Nation. And if you're a part of Ship It Nation and you're here during the live chat, go ahead and give me a rocket ship down there in chat, right? Get your attendance down there. I see a lot of you down there, the Discord over there. And it's a great place to be. I enjoy their Discord. There's a lot of great people down there. And again, they're a great sponsor for the show. Let's see. So let's hop into this. So in terms of strategy out there for what we have on Friday, I mentioned the weather edge, right? Taking AM players. And then we have game theory, right? You've got your weather edge. You've got your ownership edge that you can go out there and play. If you marry those two up, I could see Friday being a profitable slate, right? If you end up finding the right pieces of leverage, if you end up going out there and attacking the right set of tee times, that is how you can set yourself up for success, right? And you might have that random PMT time that goes off, but if you're playing at a smaller field single injury, right? If you're not playing in, that big lottery, right? The $20 lottery out there for tomorrow, right? If you go out there, you target the right players, right? Go out there, make sure you have the best weather possible. You also go out there and you take relatively low owned players, right? Mix in some leverage. That's all you can do. And if you do that in a smaller field contest, I see tomorrow going extremely well for you, right? I think you're going to get the better part of the draw there. And on top of that, there's going to be obvious ownership pivots that you can take. So the chalkiest guy I'll be playing tomorrow is going to be this Rory Shane Lowry group. They're obviously going off early, went off this afternoon. So they get the better conditions out there for Friday. And outside of them, everyone else that I'm taking is low owned. So if I can afford a piece of chalk, kind of like I did for Xander and Cantlay right out there for this week, I took them at relatively high ownership because I had pivots across the rest of the board. So it wasn't as much of a problem for somebody like me, right, to go out there and splurge on ownership up top. It's the same thing out there for my round 2 lineups, but I will have quite a few builds that do avoid a Rory and a Shane Lowry and maybe start with the Collin Morikawa Kitayama, right? Maybe start with a Matt Fitzpatrick, Alex Fitzpatrick down there at $9,500 and try and get leverage against those two at the top. So you're going to have to figure out what you're going to do with Rory and Shane Lowry, especially if you're playing the AM advantage, because they're the best group going off early. They have a really good tee time. It'll be warm by the time they're teeing off. It should be relatively calm for their first 2.5 hours of play. And their last 2 hours of play, they're going to have winds kick up a little bit, but it's not going to be nearly as nasty as what you have for the afternoon hours. So for me, it was a little bit of a hard pass, especially with I thought both of them looked really good out there today. Very obviously, it's easy to say when they go out there and shoot 11 under par, but Lowry's putting looked much improved, right? So obviously he's got to continue that going forward, but it looked a lot better out there for today. And Rory's irons, he hit a few bad ones, especially some of those 130, 150 yard shots. He struggled, but the harder shots from 175 to 200 on some of the, harder par 4s, those holes that are 475 to maybe even 500 yards, he was eating them alive. So I liked what I saw from those two. It makes them a hard fade in my book, but they would be a really good spot of leverage to take up towards the top. How are there 2 Barts? That's crazy. But hey, you found each other down there in live chat. Look at that. Marvin Harrison going number, 4 out there. Kind of surprising because I thought the Patriots might take him, but Definitely a good pickup for the Cardinals. That's crazy. You got the Bart saying hi down there. You're going to say your price picks props you think right now are good. You've got Cantlay over 4, so that's Cantlay and Xander. Okay. And then Rory less than 70 strokes and Will less than 70. Yeah, we'll talk about those. I think the birdie props are the best way to go about it because you are going to see a lot of bogeys this time. Yeah, and it's alternate shot, so it's going to be a lot harder, Mark. So I'll talk about like what I'd be looking at. And I think the 4 birdies for Xander Cantlay would be the best way to go about it. And like with Rory Lowry, I'd probably go birdies too, if you can take that. What's going on, Jordan? Hopefully you're having a great evening out here. So let's talk through a few players that I like. So I mentioned the Rory Lowry spot, but to give you a taste of how I'm approaching this slate, I'm not just going to say only go out there and play AM guys, right? I'll give you an idea of the sort of leverage plays you can get to. So Colin Morikawa, Kitayama, I thought they actually looked pretty decent today from the eye test. No shots gained metrics to work with. So it's really hard to go out there and have any sort of confidence right out there with these players. But based on what we saw from the ESPN Plus coverage, it looked like there were a lot of just, bad putts for Morikawa. He looked really bad out there with the flat stick. Was off with his pace. He was off with the lines pretty much in every single putt. Kurt Kitayama was hitting the ball an absolute mile off the tee, but the iron play was a little bit subpar for what he's used to. So it looks like both players were close. I mean, Colin was setting up birdie look after birdie look, just couldn't, go out there and cash in on any of those opportunities. And Kurt Kitayama was just setting up himself up for success and wasn't able to go out there and capitalize. So they're the sort of players that I could see bouncing back. And because they are $10,000, a little bit more expensive than they probably should be, and they also only shot -5 today, which was a little bit worse than the field average out there, I've got them at 16.2%. So rather than starting with a 30% owned player, if you're only playing like 2-3 lineups, or you're only playing a single lineup out there for tomorrow, I would highly consider starting with the Morikawa Kitayama over going with that chalky option up top. In your higher dollar stuff, in your single entries, I do think that this grouping might even be lower owned than what I have here at 16.2%. And if they're going to be close to the 10% mark in terms of combined ownership, that would be an absolute steal with the weather conditions that they're getting. So I think that they're a lot closer than most people would expect. And that's why a lot of people are going to flock right to a Rory and Shane Lowry. They're going to see what we saw, right? They were watching the coverage. If they're a hardcore golf fan, know that they looked really good across the board. But that could be a flip tomorrow, right? Maybe tomorrow it's Morikawa, Kitayama that are getting all the right yardages, right? That are going out there hitting those darts to 4 or 5 feet. I would say that it's maybe a little bit more likely that that would be a Rory and Shane Lowry, but it wouldn't be completely mind blown if it's a group like Morikawa, Kitayama, or even the Fitzpatrick brothers down there at $9,500. So to me, it's much more important about the ownership and the weather that you're getting out there with players than the actual names themselves. So that's why I said guys like Rory, Shane Lowry would be prime candidates for fade, because I don't really care about the talent. I don't really care how they played for round 1. Golf is variant enough over a 4-round sample size, let alone when it's only 18 holes. You've got weather differences between the AM and the PM guys. I try and lean into those differences as much as humanly possible. So I have Cantlay and Xander also at a lot of ownership. So obviously, right, the Patreon version has everything uncensored over there, but I have them at the same, if not slightly higher ownership than what you have with Rory and Lowry. So I think they're going to be a popular option, but they're going off in the PM wave, which I think is going to have slightly harder conditions out there. So I would probably stick away from those two, right? Even if you think they're going to smash out there for round 2, they're not playing in the best conditions. And if they were like 20% owned, right, I could see playing them in 40% of my lineups. But the fact that they're like 30% owned, just like you have with this Irish group, just makes them a really hard ask, right, to get over the field on, right? Especially if you're going to play a Rory and a Lowry. So if there was a group to take a shot on the PM, I guess it would be the guys that have shot 59 in the alternate shot format before. But it's a tough ask for me at that ownership level, and also the fact that they're playing in the bad wave. Down here in the 9K range, guys like Corey Connors, Pendrith are relatively chalky because of their score. You can say the same thing about Nick Taylor, Adam Hadwin. They're also getting a little bit of ownership. So we know we had the question before about who I'm looking for a little bit of a bounce back. For me, it's the Hogard twins. They are -4. Neither one could make a putt for their life. The only birdies that they were making were the putts that they were getting between like 4 to 5 feet. They were driving the ball all over the place. They were, hitting it a long way. They weren't keeping the ball in play, which could go one of two directions, right? And, 1 second, guys. Had to get a little cough out there. But yeah, it could go one of two directions, right? When you're hitting the ball over the planet. It could continue, right? An alternate shot that could lead to some trouble, or if they're going to go out there and make the cut, right, these two have to go out there and shoot like 4 or 5 under par. And if you take a look at the outright odds, right, this is one of the more talented groups in the field. Obviously, Rasmus, winner on the DP World Tour, is a stud over there now. Nikolai Højgaard, right, he's been in contention even at the Masters, right, just a few weeks ago, even at his young age. They're a set of twins that, I think in 2-3 years, they're going to be top 30 players in the world. So, they're not quite at that level right now, but they're still probably one of the top 5 groups in the field when it comes to talent level. And they're going to be one of the lower owned options, right? I've got them at 12.9%, but in your single one shoes, your higher dollar stuff, I think they're going to get even less attention. And it's because of the scare factor, right? A group that didn't play that well in the best ball format is going to feel really hard to get to for alternate shot. But I'll remind you that it's golf. It's this very crazy game that we play, track, are a fan of week in, week out here. And just to lean into that narrative a little bit. So they're my bounce back candidate. Kep, if you're looking for that, player to go out there for a bounce back, for me, it's those two, right? They're high quality players. They're aggressive players. Alternate shot is perhaps new to them. I don't know if they have experience on that, right? Being brothers and all, right? Playing a lot of golf in Europe growing up. But from what I've heard, especially from some of the announcers during the coverage today, the Europeans play a lot of team golf growing up, right? Obviously, these two have played thousands and thousands of rounds together, right? That's not an exaggeration, right? They're twins. They've played every stage of golf together outside of their professional ranks. One's DP World Tour, one's PGA Tour right now. But outside of that, they've played all of their golf together. I think that there's a pretty decent chance that they're decent at alternate shot. And they're similar players too, right? They have almost the same kind of skill set. That makes me think that they're going to be very good for that format. So I think some people are looking for ham and egg when it comes to that, but that familiarity of having that same skill set could also be looked at as a positive as well. Down here in the 8K range, the sort of player I'm getting to as well for a bounce back would be a Bo Hostler, same writer. I, of course, really like them for an outright this week. I took them as a core play in some of my exposure. They were low owned, right? So it's not like they were chalk that went out there and busted on me, but still burns a little bit, right? Only getting a -4 round out of seemingly players that are a lot better than that. And that's why they're only 7.7% owned, right? I have them essentially unused out there for the Showdown format. So $8,800, I'll take a shot on that down there. So there are guys like an Aaron Rai Lipsky that are going to be much higher owned that probably feel a little bit safer, right? And I'll put that in quotes, safer out there for your lineups that are going to be like 15 to 20% owned in some of the contests tomorrow. Players I prefer are the better players long term. They're more expensive, right? They're $8,800, which is actually pretty steep of a price when it comes to their skill set. But they're two of the higher birdie percentage players in the field. I think that their skill sets are decent for the alternate shot format. And overall, right, they're the sort of players, if they shoot -4, -5 in alternate shot, and they are sub 10% owned, that could win or lose you the GPP, right? And it's not like you have to use them in all your lineups, right? Somebody that's 7% owned, you could throw in 20, 25% of your lineups and have a ton of leverage to the field right there. 3-4x the field if you go out there and take that kind of exposure. And if it goes right, which honestly, it might not go right. That's the case with all these plays. That's why I said put safe out there in quotes. And you're talking about this Lipsky and Aaron Rai group, but the upside is what we're looking for out there in those large field GPPs. So I would say you want to be comfortable with being uncomfortable when you're putting together your lineups, and you want to learn to embrace more of these nasty plays. So, for example, if I'm taking that chalk up top, like I am, right, with a Rory and Shane Lowry in quite a few lineups, well, a good way to offset that is by taking the Højgaard twins. It's by going down here and taking a Hostler, Sam Ryder, and instantly getting the leverage that I need to the field. So that's why I'm comfortable taking those two up top, right? I have these kind of pivots mixed into my player pool. And if you're going to take, maybe it's a Xander, Cantlay that you're taking up top, right, as that chalky player, you're going to have someone to offset it, right? So whether it's in the 8, 9K range, like I'm doing with these two, or further down the board, you've got to get different at some point. Next up, you've got this Austin Eckroat, Chris Gotterup group. They're also going off with a relatively early tee time. And they're what I thought was a great pairing heading in. And the ownership isn't, crazy on them, right? They're 14.8%. So I wouldn't call them a leverage play by any means, but they're also certainly far from chalk. Down here in the 7Ks, we've got Dylan Wu and Justin Lauer that'll play. Two guys that have an early tee time, which will help. And they're only 6.1% owned, right? They had a pretty average round out there for today's action. But at $7,500, just kind of an unassuming pairing, right? They're not a flashy pairing like you have with some of the other players. I think is going to keep them as a little bit of a leverage play. Another 7K option would be this Alex Smalley, Matthias Schmid group. They were unexplainably much chalkier than what I thought they would be, at least heading into the main slate. A lot of people played them for some reason, and they completely busted, right? They shot -2. That was chalk that I stayed away from. But now that everyone's burned by it, they feel jaded, right? After an 18-hole sample, they're going to be extremely low owned for the Showdown format. So, a lot of times I like to just go out there, kind of spite the people that play them as chalk and hope that we get that bounce back, right? And maybe they shoot -5, which would be great. It'd be a fantastic ceiling round out there for the alternate shot format. And they miss the cut by 1 because the cut's probably going to be like -8, -9. So even if they shoot 5 under par, they're probably not making the weekend. It would just be the ultimate troll to like the 15 to 20% they came in at in some of those GPPs. So they're a decent bounce back spot. And if they were chalky heading into the week, a lot of that was because of Matthias Schmid's form. He was coming in with really solid form. Obviously, Alex Smalley on the other end of that, right? Some of the worst form out there in the entire field. But I understood why they were getting a little bit of tension, but they came in way higher owned than I think a lot of people were expecting. In terms of 6K options, I am trying to save a little bit of salary on guys like a Peter Malnati and Russell Knox. They also have a morning wave tee time. They're cheap, right? They give you a little bit of salary flexibility. And the form is there in both players, right? Malnati has a win over the last month. Russell Knox has been a top 50 player when it comes to his recent form. So I'll buy in on that, right? I'll go out there. I'll take him in a few lineups. And the idea is they're low owned too, right? They're only 4.4%. They shot a very average, a very non-flashy -7 out there for the best ball format. And if they go out there, they shoot something like -3, -4, that is almost for sure going to be optimal down there in the 6K range. So there are a lot of shots that you can take down here. There are quite a few players I'm including. That's it for the highlighted plays, but even the whole way down to, I think, like $6,500, $6,600, there are players that are well within reason to take. So if you need the salary to go up there and, play a Rory, a Shane Lowry, and take a 9K option as your second man in, there are players down there in the 6K range to make that work. So from a lineup construction perspective, I could see myself going some studs and duds out there for my exposure. In fact, especially for like my large field GPP lineups, I'm probably going to have some lineups that go Rory, Shane Lowry, and one of these two groups as my second man in. But for my single entries, it's where I want to be a little bit more balanced. That's why I said if you guys are only entering a few lineups, I kind of like starting with one of these two cheaper groups down here. So that'll give you leverage, right, against those two super high-owned groups, right, at the top end of the board. It'll let you lean into the weather edge that we're looking for, right, with these two having an early tee time. And it gives you more salary to work with the rest of your lineup out there. So from the lineup construction perspective, I guess in large field GPPs, I like the idea of double stacking, right? Going after all of those points up there. But in the contest where you're putting a little bit more money down, right? I don't want to be super chalky, right? I'm trying to avoid that, but I also want to be smart about how I'm using my money. So the way that I can accomplish both of them, right, is by going cheaper, right? Spreading out my salary a little bit, but by taking these lower owned options, right? Because they're lower owned, they're going to get us different, off that chalk, yet still give us a pretty solid lineup when it comes to projection. So that's the idea with the lineup construction that I'm going with. I'm probably going to be entering about 15 lineups in the big $20. So not anything crazy. It's a smaller player pool than normal because of that. And then probably 4 or 5 single entries where I'm going out there and taking more of a contrarian approach. So that's what I'm doing for Showdown. We'll go over any questions you may have down in chat. I'm trying to keep an eye on some of the draft down there. So it looks like a tackle went number 5. Okay. I don't know who the tackle is. I've not paid much attention to the draft this year, if I'm being honest. But okay, we got a Tennessee on the clock there at number 7. Let's see what's going on down there in chat. You love your show and you're a member here and found it through Ship It. Well, I appreciate that, Edward. Welcome down to the live chat. And let me know if you guys have any questions. What's going on, Jake? Hopefully you're having a solid Thursday evening. So what I'm going to do before we hop into the prop section, which prop section, we do have some stuff to go through. So we're going to have quite a bit to talk about there, but I want to go through some lineup construction stuff. So I just mentioned a few different, types of lineups I might be building. If I'm going more this top heavy approach by taking a Rory Lowry, maybe it is the Fitzpatrick brothers, right, as my second man in, that puts us down at $7,400. So that's why I mentioned potentially using the 6K range to open up some salary. So that's where we could go down here and throw a Malnati into this kind of lineup and give ourselves a little bit more flexibility to work with. So if we do so, right, puts us up there in the top end of the 7s. We take somebody down here at like $7,100. That's going to give us even more flexibility, right, to go up and spend up a little bit. So maybe we throw a Sahoe in there, right, a second guy down there. It's a little bit cheaper. Now we're up at 8 grand remaining, right? So if we throw in the middle of the 7K guy here, we throw in like Lauer and Wu, right, as one of our, just middle end plays. Now we can spend back up into the 8K range. So it's a little bit more doable than I think most people think. Like I think some of the 6K plays are almost identical to the guys you can play in the 7. So that's why in large field GPPs, I like this kind of build. Whereas in single entries where I'm trying to, maybe play a little bit tighter than I am in the large field GPPs, I don't hate the idea of starting a little bit cheaper. So I mentioned potentially starting with like a Morikawa Kitayama, second man in, maybe even going down here to the Højgaard twins at $9,100, right? I'm still being contrarian about it, right? I'm still fading a lot of really chalky guys towards the top end of the board. But what I'm trying to do here is make sure that I'm getting quality players across the board, right? I want to be less aggressive with the guys in the 6K range. So down here, like that's where I'd like an Eckroat. Got her up. Down here in the 7K range, it's where I throw in probably like a Wallace Olesen. Like I feel like that's a pretty decent pairing. I'm down there in that range. I'm not going to be taking like a $6,800 golfer. Like if I'm going to go down here and take a cheaper play, like maybe it's Alex Smalley, Matthias Schmidt, right at like $7,300. So I'd be a little bit tighter about my lineup construction if I was going out there and playing single entry. That's just my personal style on it, right? I play a little bit of a more conservative exposure when I go out there and play my single entries, but that doesn't mean that I'm just playing a bunch of chalk, right? There's a difference between being a little bit more conservative than going out there and playing chalk. By conservative, I mean more so with where I'm spending my salary, right? I'm not going super double spend up or anything like that. That's more so what I'm getting at there. If I was playing cash, I'd be taking all AM guys, like we've already mentioned multiple times here. And I would probably be playing it like I did for my single entries. I'd be a little bit more spread out with the players that I'm taking. I'd be more willing to take chalky guys that are starting off there early. Like I think Nick Taylor and Adam Hadwin, they have a morning tee time and they're a little bit chalky. Like that's where I think that they're pretty decent plays out there for that format. So I'm not a big cash player. I'm not going to cover much on cash just because it isn't my specialty or anything that I cover here all that often. But if you do have any questions about specific players for cash, I will touch on that. But that's all I've got for DFS. So if you're just here for DFS, smash that like button before you hop on out of here. And best of luck to your exposure. But let's talk props. So in terms of props, I want to talk about live props in a second because I think there's a lot of value there. So I know we talked about a few of them on the last live stream, but there's even more I want to point out, honestly. But let's start with the PGA stuff, just so that we can, take this tournament by tournament. They've got guys at 4 birdies, and I do think that there's going to be an advantage to going off early. The problem is that this is not an easy golf course, right? And some of these strokes lines where they have guys at like 2 under par, 2.5 under par, is asking quite a bit. And I actually went back to my video last year to take a look at their round 2 pricing, just to get an idea, right, for what they were offering out there for the second day. And it wasn't nearly as windy as what they're calling for tomorrow. And they had like the lowest strokes lines were, I think, like 71 strokes. They had a lot of guys at 71.5, and they even had guys at like 72, 72.5 strokes. For this round, right, the guys at 72.5 strokes are guys like Steve Stricker and Matt Kuchar. So this is a fade board to me. Like, I know we had questions before about like unders at 70 strokes and whatnot. I would stay away from that. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be birdies made. I just think that you're going to see quite a few bogeys. And because of all the water out there, there is the opportunity for doubles or even worse out there from the scoring perspective. So if I was going to support a player, like if I was, going to avoid fades, it'd be over here on the birdie board, right? I'd be trying to take guys to go out there and maybe get to the 4 birdie mark. These guys at 4, it just feels like getting to 5 birdies is asking for quite a bit. So in terms of my exposure here, down here at the guys for 3.5, right, we'd be looking for our morning tee time and somebody that you at least have one good putter, one good iron player, and try and figure it out that way. So like these Højgaard twins, they're long, right? They can take advantage of the par 5s pretty much no matter who's hitting the tee shot. They also have a long second player, right? So they can still reach those par 5s with those 3 woods and whatnot. That feels like a pretty decent pairing to take for an over at 3.5. They also have a morning tee time, which I think is going to be huge. A Nick Taylor, Adam Hadwin, they've been a lot better in 2024 than what they were for like 2022, 2023. So players with decent momentum, decent shots gained metrics, also top 30 players in the field when it comes to birdie or better percentage. So those would be potentials for overs. And again, we're trying to stay to the AM guys because we want to take our players in the best conditions that we possibly can. Like even a Bill Hostler, Sam Ryder, I would probably lean on for an over, but I don't like them as much as these other two groups. Matt and Alex Fitzpatrick, same thing, right? I'd be leaning on their over and maybe just don't like them as much as these other two players. And who else? I guess Keith Mitchell, Joel Damon, same thing. Like I would lean on their over, but I'm not sure I like it enough to take it. Those would be the kind of props I'd be looking for in that direction. But like I said with the strokes, these seem too low. Like this golf course has a lot of trouble out there, a lot of water. When it gets windy, it can get, I don't want to call it carnage out there. It's not going to play like 2-3 over par, but you could see the scoring average close to 72 out there tomorrow, which would clearly make some of these over values. And if we're going to fade players, we probably want to do it for the PM guys, right? The players going off a little bit later, they're going to be dealing with blustier conditions. So just a few that stand out here. Like even this group, even the two old guys, like going out there playing in pretty windy conditions, that feels like that might go a little bit sideways. So like I'm going to keep them in there for now, but maybe we change it up for somebody else. You could throw in Thomas Dietrich, Robert McIntyre for a fade. Like I think they're probably even a little bit too low. You got Pendrith, Connors out. They're pretty good wind players. So maybe I give those two the benefit of the doubt. But either this Stricker Kuchar group looks like it's a pretty solid fade to take, or this Dietrich and Robert McIntyre group. So for the sake of this, we may actually make this a flex play and go out there and just take that as our combination, try and get at least 3 of those 4 right. And what would that pay, just out of curiosity? Or can you even do a flex out here on this arena format? I guess they changed that. I didn't realize that. I've only done like 2-man powers. So I guess I didn't realize that they changed it up a little bit, but it doesn't look like you can even do a flex play over here on Prize Picks after they changed it up down here in Florida. So I guess we could risk it, go out there and do that. I could just take Stricker and Kuchar out and make it that 3-man like I was hoping for. But let me think about it for a second and get a sip of this coffee, and we'll figure out what we're going to do. Or do we make it a 2-man and just really tighten it up? We're going to do that. So I'm going to make this a 2-man just for the sake of this. I'm still going to enter more props over here on Prize Picks by the time we get to lock tomorrow morning. But for the sake of the live stream, what we're going to do for this exposure is we're going to take my favorite of both categories, right? We're going to take this Højgaard and I guess Højgaard squared combo, right? The twins out there for an over at 3.5. And then an over for a PM strokes line at 71 strokes, actually. So I can only enter $5 slips because they have me limited still, even after the rule changes down here in Florida. And that feels like the right kind of combination out there from round 2. So like I said, this is a golf course that I think is more difficult than people realize. The change of format, I think, is going to cloud a lot of people's judgment when it goes out there to looking at this golf course. An alternate shot, if you hit a ball in the water, you don't get to do a redo like you did today, right? There's no second player to save you out there on the best ball. You have to play that shot and you have to take those penalty strokes. So if I'd be looking at fades, it's for strokes. And for anything positive, avoid that variance, right? Avoid those water balls, avoid all of that headache that you could potentially have, and stick to the birdies or better side. In terms of LIV Golf stuff, and I guess let me see if there's any prop questions down below. I know Mark was asking about them before. So just to go over the props that you mentioned, can't lay more than 4 birdies. What I would do is I would look at the setup. I haven't been able to look at the pin sheet yet. If it's playing easy, then yes, I like can't lay and Xander over 4. I think that'd make a lot of sense. Rory less than 70 strokes, I'd be a little bit more hesitant about. Now, they're the kind of group that I could see playing well an alternate shot. Like guys like Xander and Cantlay, right? They blow up that format, right? They still go pretty low, but they're at 69.5. That's a pretty scary projection. But your winners last year, Davis Riley, who's the other one? I always forget the other guy's name. Nick Hardy that went out there and won last year. Those two absolutely nuked for the alternate shot format. That can happen, but that is extremely rare, right? That's why they went out there and won last year in pretty dominating fashion. I would stay away from the stroke stuff. If I was going to take anything, I would take a birdie line, just like you had for the Xander and Cantlay group. So I might pivot a little bit there, right, to those birdie or better props. And then you're saying the same thing for Will and Sahith. I would go to the birdie or better stuff. So I would just make it the 3 overs on birdies, all of these here at 4. Now, I'm going to wait to see conditions right before I go out there and do so. But that's what I would do if you want to go out there and tail the elite groups out there. So it's, again, I think it's a tougher course than people realize. And just to give you an idea, I'll show you what I'm talking about by like this course being like low key, pretty damn difficult. So just one second. It's TPC Louisiana. So let me bring up the Pro Visualizer. And I just want to go through some of the holes, because you'll see in about 30 seconds why I say to be a little bit careful if you haven't seen this course before. So just one second. All right, so here's what I'm talking about. So I've got Pro Visualizer up here. I'm going to bring up the 3D planner, and I'm just going to show you the water out here. So hole number 1 doesn't have a bunch of water, but you'll see as we, next hole is what I meant to hit. So hole number 2, you've got not a bunch of water in play, but like look at hole 3, right? You've got this water down the right. You had groups that actually ended up double bogeying this hole today because of how difficult it can play. And it's not the only water hole that you get, right? Hole 4, water down the right. Hit it in there. That's a double, triple bogey right there. Next hole, don't have to worry about it as much, right? Hole 6, water the whole way down the left. And normally that one plays into the wind, is an absolute brute. It actually played difficult today in the best ball format. Hole 8, there's some shit there on the left and the right you can get into, which can, obviously cause problems. Hole 9 has that water in play. Hole 10, no water. Hole 11, I believe, no water too. So that's a pretty easy hole, I'd say. Even hole 12, but it is 490 yards, right? So you have a lot of these longer holes mixed in, right? 221 here at the par 3. 15 is 500 yards, and it's a par 4. 16, you've got water in play, but it is shorter, so that can be a birdie look. But 17 has water in play, and it's a long par 3. So the point is, right, there are scoreable looks. That's why they go low in the best ball format. But with all this water and all these super long par 4s, there are a lot of blow-up holes. So if you're going to support any players, like if they're going to cover a 70 stroke line, they're still going to have to make 3 birdies, right, to get to -3. And that would be without making any bogeys, right? To go out there and realistically probably cover 70 strokes, they're going to make like 4 birdies, maybe 1 bogey on the day, right? They'd be pushing birdies or better right there, right? Let alone if they go out there and they make just 1 more birdie than that. That's how I would approach it out there for that mark. So hopefully that's a good feedback, what you're looking for. I don't want to talk you off of supporting the elite tier groups, just maybe how you're doing it, if that makes sense. 15 lineups, about how many players in my pool. I don't know the exact count, but it's in the upper 20s. So I'm spreading it out quite a bit. And my single entries are going to be different lineups, right? So it's like 15. It might be closer to 20 lineups that I'm throwing in the large field GPP. And then it'll be 5 more unique lineups that I'm using for single entries. So about 25 lineups, and I think in the mid 20s for players. So it's pretty spread out. Thank you. You've got the Twins for over 3.5 birdies, and you go to hit over 70 strokes. Okay, I like that. All right, so let's talk about this LIV Golf stuff. So let me go to Adelaide, show you guys the weather for today. Again, this locks in like 37 minutes. So we're going to have a really good picture of what to expect in terms of weather. The golf course is over here. It's pretty close to the downtown in Adelaide over there. It's next to no wind, right? It's mid 60s, very mild temperatures. GFS model, next to no wind, maybe kicking up a little bit towards the end, but nothing crazy. Icon model looks completely calm. Medio blue looks relatively calm too. Again, this is 10 miles an hour wind. It's not that much to speak of. Access model is calling for next to no wind. So we'll have to see if it's truly as calm as what some of these models are calling for. But let me remind you of the scoring at this golf course. So I'm just bringing up Data Golf real quick, going over some of the scoring averages from last year. It got as low as nearly 4 under par at this golf course. There were more holeouts at this event than any other professional event around the world last year. And round 2, it played 3.7 under par. Round 3 played 3 under par. Round 1, where it was a little bit windy, it still played nearly 2 strokes under par. So I'm expecting this place to get lit on fire, right? At least a 2 under par scoring average, if not maybe even close to this 3 under par that we had out there for round 3. And on Underdog, the board is still even priced different than what we have over here on Prize Picks. Prize Picks for their LIV Golf board has guys really low, right? They have all the elite tier guys at 67.5. And they even have guys like Sergio, Paul Casey at 68 strokes. And you'll remember from our Wednesday live stream, we got Paul Casey for an under 69.5, right? Over there in Underdog. We got guys, who was another one we took? It was Paul Casey, and then Munoz, right? Was at 70.5 strokes. The guys that are comparable to Munoz over here on Prize Picks, like a Matthew Wolff, Leishman, and like Lahiri, right, are a whole 2 strokes lower down there at 68.5. So if you got that slip from yesterday, you have to feel pretty good about going into the slate here in 30 minutes. But there's still a lot of value over here in Underdog that we can take. So a lot of it has been bumped already. I entered I think it's like $600 of slips. So yeah, I'm going to have a lot of exposure to watch out here tonight. But there's still some value to be had here. So one is Carlos Ortiz. That one has not moved yet. This Harold Varner one hasn't moved yet. But let me find my 2 favorites to go out there and mix in. So it might be those 2. Actually, I'm going to try and give you the ones in the best form to go out there and mix in. So we're going to go Carlos Ortiz. We'll also go Sergio Garcia over there at 69 strokes. And there are a few others. I can see like 2 or 3, maybe even 4 other props that haven't bumped quite yet. But these would be my favorite 2 that you could get to. Carlos Ortiz, if you haven't seen his recent form, he's finished top 15 in 5 straight events. That includes a win on the Asian Tour, also a top 5 finish over his last 5 worldwide starts. And Sergio Garcia is in solid form himself, right? Nearly won LIV Miami, has been one of the better guys on the LIV Tour in all of 2024. And if I'm expecting the scoring average to be 2.5, 3 under par, that means Carlos Ortiz, right, could have an even shots gained day, like be an average player out there, right? He's been gaining like a stroke and a half, 2 strokes to the field, right, over his last 20 rounds worldwide. He'd go out there and hit at 69 strokes, right? He wouldn't just push, he'd hit, right? Somebody like Sergio Garcia could have an average day in push, which is criminal if you've seen how he's played over there on the LIV Golf side. So if you take a look at the comparisons, right, Sergio is down here at 68 strokes. So there's an entire stroke difference there. And based on form, like I know they don't have Carlos Ortiz up here. He would be at most at 68.5 strokes, so an entire stroke lower. And frankly, I'd probably have him at 68. Right? He's a comparable player to Sergio, to Paul Casey, to an Abraham Answer in terms of his form. Like literally, like 5 top 15 finishes in a row. That's crazy. Like I know it's Asian Tour, right? Like say what you want about the field strength there, but he's still playing really good golf to go out there and accomplish that. Feels like an absolute criminal price tag. So we mentioned the combination over in Prize Picks already. If you're just joining us, it's an over on the Twins when it comes to birdies, and also an over on strokes for Dietrich and McIntyre. We've gone for a little bit later, but I think my favorite value on the boards, like period, is what we have over here in Underdog for LIV Golf. This course is it's way too short. If you haven't seen the hole-by-hole breakdown, I guess I'll show you that real quickly from the LIV Golf site. It's like a municipal course. Like I play munis down here in South Florida all the time that are longer than what we're going to have for this golf course. So if you're looking for guys to go out there and shoot something like 6, 7 under par, that's exactly what we're going to get from this golf course. So let me find where I can bring up this info. This site is really hard to find and hard to navigate, I should say. So okay, there's the course information. I guess that wasn't that bad to find. But you'll see over here, like the par 5s are like 500 yards, like 7's your first par 5, and it's 514. Your next par 5 is 560. That's reachable by the entire field. Next one is only 529, and your last one's only 550, right? So they're all relatively short, but what's even more of a joke are the par 3s. So your first par 3 is only 130. Your next par 3 is 165. Your last par 3, and I guess, is there only 3 par 3s? I guess I skipped one of them. So yeah, your last par 3 is 174. There still are 4 par 3s, but all of those are short. You have multiple sub 400 yard par 4s, right? Like the last hole is 377. You have one up here that's 355. Hole 4 is only 357 yards. Borderline drivable holes, right? For players like Bryson, DJ, your longer players. And then all the par 5s are easy, and your par 3s, it's not even like they're going to challenge you on those sort of holes. That's why the scoring goes absolutely nuclear here. So I wanted to mention that because I know we, took a slip yesterday over there for LIV Golf. If I was going to be entering slips for like 1.5, 2 units, right? Maybe adding a little bit of extra cheddar, it'd be on these sort of slips. And that's what I did. I played them heavier than what I have over there at Prize Picks. Part of that is because of my limitations, but I have other ways to get exposure over there on Prize Picks. So these $5 slips are not the only exposure that I'm getting to. You could probably glean that from some of the things that I've said here on the live stream before. But yeah, these ones on Underdog are no doubt the ones that I'd be a little bit heavier on. So that's what I'll say for the prop side. That is honestly all I have for this live stream. I want to check in on this. I want to watch the LIV Golf here in a little bit, but we'll go over anything down in chat that you have. Looks like we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead, cut it off here, guys. That is all I've got for the round 2 live stream. Again, a little bit of a quicker format. I know maybe not as many people going out there and playing round 2 Showdown, but for those that are still putting in the research, going to go out there and get some exposure. Want to make sure there's some content out there for you, right? A lot of people taking the week off, but not your boy over here. I'll get you guys covered. Make sure you have all the information, and hopefully you're a little bit more prepared for tomorrow's action. Best of luck with all of your exposure, whether it's DFS, props, you name it. Best of luck for all of that out there on Friday. Like maybe we have a solid weekend, a solid night out here for the LIV Golf format. And round 2, let's say, I guess rounds 3 and 4 live streams, but rounds 2 and 3 over there for LIV. We'll be doing that over the weekend as well. Those will also be sponsored by Ship It Nation. So looking forward to seeing all of you down there in the live chat. And again, best of luck out there with all that you're getting to.